Hi, have put together a collection of violin concerto cadenzas, and the inspiration for this was actually a piece that we were meant to premiere in April. It was a piece that Jordan and I commissioned from our very dear friend Ryan Jesperson, and we had commissioned it kind of as a graduation present to ourselves. It's a piece for violin and trombone and chamber orchestra. Because Jordan finished his DMA in 2018 and I finished mine in 2019. And Ryan, the piece is called And Violet Makes Three, because we have three children. And Violet, our third child, was born in 2018. So kind of like in the midst of all of this. And so since we weren't able to premiere the piece in April, we kind of talked to Ryan about maybe doing some kind of a teaser, because there is a cadenza section that's just violin and trombone alone. It's a pretty short section, but we could do that as sort of a preview of coming attractions for the time when hopefully we can premiere the piece as it's intended. So I kind of started with that idea, and then I just thought of a few other concertos that I actually wrote my DMA paper about violin concertos, and I won't get into that, but that was kind of a main issue in my paper. So I had done a lot of research of violin concertos in the late 20th and early 21st century, so it was kind of fun for me to go back through some of those and pick out some cadenzas to learn. And a cadenza is, something generally that references the concerto as a whole. So it's a little bit weird for me to play these, just pull them out of context and play them. But it's something I can do by myself in my room. So that's the number one selling point. But just for any non-musicians out there, a concerto is typically a piece for a solo instrument with orchestra. And the term cadenza comes from the word cadence. And so you'd have like the big cadence on the 5 chord that's going to resolve to the 1 to end, but then the orchestra will hold that 5 chord, and then that would give the soloist a chance to show off. And often that would be improvised or maybe worked out in advance by the soloist, and they usually would reference themes from the concerto. But starting, primarily like late Romantic and 20th century composers started to write out the cadenzas. I guess they don't trust soloists that much, but there's also been sort of a recent trend of performers writing their own cadenzas to earlier works. But all the cadenzas that I am playing were composed by composers. They're not improvised or written by performers. And they, in some way either reference themes from the concerto as a whole, or maybe kind of build on emotional themes, or build on some kind of unifying impulse of the rest of the concerto. And I'm going to talk about them in reverse order. So I'll talk about Ryan's piece first. And all I'll say about that is that he wrote motives that refer to our 3 children, and then those motives are all referenced in the cadenza. And then the piece I'm going to do just prior to that is a violin concerto called Trouble by V.J. Iyer, which was I think written in 2017. And that the name Trouble comes from a famous quote from Congressman John Lewis about, good trouble, and which I thought was fitting since Congressman Lewis died recently. And that piece has a lot of sort of social overtones, and the cadenza itself is very contemplative and has repeated sections that kind of are meditative and kind of build an intensity and then ebb, which I think is kind of fits in the overall emotional thrust of the piece. And the piece I'm going to do previous to that is the cadenza from Sofia Gubidulina's first violin concerto, the offertorium. And that violin concerto, the term offertorium is kind of references a few different very interesting things that are the inspiration for her piece. And one, of course, is the a religious reference to that part of a religious service. And then also the musical offering by Bach, which is taking a theme and then varies that kind of noodly theme. And then, but the other kind of maybe lesser known reason for the title is she wrote it for violinist Gidon Kramer, and she watched him perform, and she felt like he was giving of himself, that he was offering himself as a performer. And so she takes the theme from the musical offering, and then throughout the concerto, each time the theme is presented, she takes away from it. So it kind of gets dismantled, and then it ultimately is put back together backwards. So there are multiple levels of the term offertorium, and the cadenza kind of comes almost smack dab in the middle of that. It's a single movement concerto, not divided into movements, and so the cadenza is kind of a pivotal moment right in the middle. And then the first one I'm going to play is by Schnittke, and this is actually a cadenza that Schnittke wrote for the Beethoven violin concerto. And in this piece, he quotes several other violin concertos. So it's kind of this like travelogue of the violin concerto repertoire, which is so interesting. And so I'm going to actually take a moment and talk through the quotes, just in case you aren't an expert in the violin concerto repertoire, or even if you are, some of them happen pretty quickly. So I'm going to take a moment and talk through and point out where the quotes are. And then when you hear it, it'll hopefully be a little bit more interesting to you. So the beginning of the cadenza starts, he's kind of referencing the timpani that opens the violin concerto. So there's a... So there's running eighth notes, even sometimes done by left-hand picks, so that continues. And then it's mostly kind of like traditional, developing different themes from the Beethoven violin concerto for a while. But then, I'm going to just play this part. So this is, again, kind of building on the timpani theme. So this is the first kind of divergence, and if you have, good Beethoven ears, you would have recognized this. Is actually from Beethoven's 7th Symphony. So I think he kind of takes the bum, 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 and kind of like segues seamlessly into a different Beethoven. And then this is the main theme. So of the Beethoven violin concerto. And so you have half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half. And then the pizzicato, I'm just going to play the top notes of the pizzicato here. So goes up a half step. Here we had, F sharp. This one starts on G natural, but we have the same pattern of half steps. So half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, but then another whole step. Kind of like, what if we change it just a little bit? And this is a little bit of foreshadowing. And then the next, sorry, don't worry, I didn't record the rest of this on my phone. So then just some more kind of traditional, you know, kind of flashy stuff that's building on the themes of the violin concerto. But the next divergence comes here. So that is the opening theme from Bartók's first violin concerto. And this is one of my favorite music history stories, so I'm going to try to tell it really, really fast, which Bartók was in love with a violinist when he was a young professor. And this is the time when he was like going out and recording indigenous music. And they were very good friends, but I think she wanted to be friends and he wanted to be more. And so there's a letter that you can read. He writes about his feelings. And at the end of the letter, he says, and yet, and he writes this. And that's the opening theme for that violin concerto that he wrote for her and gave to her. And then it was never published in his life, but then was published after he died. And, but anyway, so that's that little snippet you want to listen for. And then I'm going to jump. I'll put it into context. So, I'll jump. Sorry. So then the next divergence. So again, listen to this, you know, where we have this whole tone. So this is from the Berg Violin Concerto. And the Berg Violin Concerto is kind of the dominant piece that he quotes over and over again in this cadenza. And so, and Berg is my bread and butter. So maybe one of the reasons I really love this. So the Berg Violin Concerto is a 12-tone, written using 12-tone serial technique, which the 12-tone row for this concerto is alternating major and minor triads, and then this pattern of whole steps, which connects into a Bach chorale that Berg uses at the end of the second movement. So this is the Berg row for his violin concerto. So that's from the Berg Violin Concerto. So you hear the whole steps. So I think Schnittke is really kind of, I think, beautifully and very creatively connecting, you know, this, you know, and this. And that's kind of where we get a lot of the interest over the next, the rest kind of in the second half of this cadenza. So we have this, back to Schnittke. So that's our nod to the Berg. And then, sorry. So it's hard to do it out of context. That is from Bartók's second violin concerto. And then we have this. Which is from the Shostakovich violin concerto, second movement. And he takes this, you know, and then he just modulates it up. So he's just taking that little snippet that's from Shostakovich and he modulates it up. So that's one of those, you blink and you might miss it, but I wanted to point it out because it's great. And then back to some more Beethoven stuff. He keeps coming back to this, you know, dum. Which of course is also Shostakovich. That's from the cadenza of the Shostakovich violin concerto, which is a wonderful emotional cadenza. So great to take a nod to that. And then we get into, you know, kind of building on these chords. Just take this out of context. But Then we build up. Oh, let's play it. Which is also Berg. And here's Berg again. Hopefully now you recognize that. But then here we go to this, which is Bartok's second. So it's really cool how he mixes those all, like Shostakovich, Berg, Bartok, all mixed together. And then here going on. This is all Berg, but no, it's this part that's, you know, just obsessively repeating the whole steps, because that's what I think he's connecting to the Beethoven theme. So all of this next part is all Berg, and then we get into these, then the timpani comes in, and then we have, which is Berg, and then, which is Brahms, and then back to Berg. And then all the rest of this, you know, the big ending is all Berg, 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 and then all that's Berg, then we're back to Beethoven. So I hope you enjoy this cadenza in its entirety and all the rest of the cadenzas that I'm going to play today.